Chapter 1. The Public Ambush. Murphy's bar hadn't changed in 15 years. The neon beer signs still flickered unevenly against the dark wood paneling. The air still carried the heavy mix of fried food, spilled ale, and old conversations. A muted football game glowed from the televisions above the bar, commentators moving their mouths without sound. It was a place built for noise and distraction, not closure. Calvin Briggs paused outside the entrance for a moment before stepping in. He wasn't nervous. He'd walked into compounds at 2 in the morning with less information and more at stake. He knocked on doors overseas, knowing there was a good chance someone on the other side would try to kill him. Signing divorce papers at a neighborhood bar should have been simple. Jessica had insisted on neutral ground, said it would be less tense, said she didn't want him coming to the apartment again. He adjusted the cuffs of his plain navy button-down shirt and stepped inside. The door creaked. A few heads turned, then turned back. Except one. Jessica sat in a corner booth near the back wall. The same booth where they used to celebrate anniversaries before his deployments. Before distance became permanent. She looked different. Not dramatically, but intentionally. Her hair was straighter, sharper. Makeup deliberate. A fitted black dress that wasn't meant for paperwork. It was meant for attention. And she wasn't alone. The man beside her filled the booth like it belonged to him. Wide shoulders. Thick neck. Veins running across forearms that rested on the table like coiled cables. His t-shirt stretched tight across his chest, the kind of tight that said it was chosen that way. He had a predator's smile, slow, confident, waiting. Brock. Calvin had seen photos, gym posts, highlight reels. They hadn't done justice to his size. Jessica noticed Calvin first. Her lips curved, not warmly, not kindly, smug. There he is, she said. Brock turned his head slowly, sizing him up without standing. His eyes moved over Calvin's frame. Average height, lean build, no visible bulk. Clean-shaven, calm, not impressive. A phone rested against a salt shaker on the table, angled just slightly upward. Recording. Calvin clocked it instantly. He approached the booth without breaking stride. You said 7, Calvin said evenly. It is 7, Jessica replied, glancing at her watch theatrically. You're not in the military anymore. You don't have to be early. Brock chuckled, a low rumble. He still walks like he's got to stick up his spine. Calvin didn't sit yet. He looked at the phone. That for documentation? He asked. Jessica tilted her head innocently, just in case things get heated. Brock leaned forward, forearms on the table. Wouldn't want the big bad veteran losing his temper, right? There it was. Calvin slid into the booth opposite them. He placed his hands flat on the table, relaxed. I'm here to sign, he said. That's it. Brock laughed, louder this time, glancing around as if inviting the bar into the joke. A couple of nearby patrons looked over. Man, Brock said, shaking his head. I gotta say, Jess told me you were intense. Thought I'd see, I don't know, something. Jessica folded her hands. He works construction now, she added lightly. Office side. Desk job. Brock corrected, smirking. All that training, and now he pushes paperwork. Calvin held his gaze steady. Silence unsettled loud men. Brock shifted slightly, filling it. You know what Jess told me? Brock continued. She said she finally feels safe. Jessica's lips twitched upward. She's finally with someone strong, she said. The words were clean, deliberate, practiced. A small pulse ticked in Calvin's jaw. He remembered nights overseas when mortar rounds fell closer than expected. Remembered sleeping in dirt beside men who trusted him with their lives. Remembered calling Jessica from satellite phones, promising he'd come home whole. Strong. Brock leaned back and flexed one arm casually, the fabric tightening across his bicep. I protect what's mine, he said. Calvin's eyes flicked briefly to Jessica. Mine. He noticed the phone again. The red recording faintly glowing. Bait. Brock cracked his knuckles one by one. Loud. Slow. Walk out now, Brock said, voice dropping just enough to carry menace, or I'll put you in a coma. A few heads turned fully this time. Jessica didn't look surprised. Calvin looked at Brock's hands. Thick knuckles, scarred from striking. Then he looked at his own sleeves. He began unbuttoning them. Not dramatically, methodically. One cuff, then the other. Brock grinned wider. Oh, here we go. Jessica leaned slightly forward, eyes bright. Calvin rolled his sleeves up just enough to reveal forearms lined with pale scars, thin lines, burn marks, jagged edges that didn't come from a gym. You fight in a cage, Calvin said quietly. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried. Spending 14 years neutralizing threats overseas taught me 53 ways to end a fight without breaking a sweat. The booth seemed smaller suddenly. Brock's grin faltered for half a second. Calvin's gaze didn't leave him. You see these? Calvin tapped one faded scar near his wrist. That wasn't from a referee stepping in. The air between them shifted. Not loud, not explosive. Heavy. Brock leaned forward, pushing his chest out. You trying to scare me? No, Calvin replied calmly. I'm explaining the difference. Jessica scoffed. You always do this. You act superior. Calvin looked at her fully now. I'm not acting, he said. Brock's jaw tightened. You think because you were over there you're some kind of monster? Calvin held his gaze another beat. Then he reached forward, not to strike, to adjust the phone. He turned it slightly, so it faced him more directly. If this is for the internet, Calvin said evenly, make sure you get my good side. A few patrons laughed quietly. Brock's face reddened. Calvin stood. No rush, no adrenaline spike, just controlled movement. He placed the signed papers back on the table. You want a reaction, he said. You won't get one. Brock stood abruptly too, chair scraping. Sit back down. Calvin didn't. For a split second, Brock shifted his weight, considering a shove. Considering a swing. Calvin's stance changed subtly. Balanced. Grounded. Not aggressive. Prepared. Brock hesitated. Something in Calvin's eyes didn't match his frame. Jessica's smile had faded now. Calvin buttoned nothing. He left his sleeves rolled. I hope, Calvin said quietly to Brock. You never have to learn the 54th way. Then he looked at Jessica one last time. I'll have my lawyer handle it. And he walked toward the exit. No one stopped him. The door closed behind him with the same creak it had opened. Outside, the night air felt cooler. He exhaled slowly, muscles never having fully tensed. As he reached his truck, he glanced back through the bar window. Brock was animated now, talking big, gesturing, replaying something to the phone. Jessica was leaning in close, laughing. Calvin got into his truck. He didn't start immediately. He replayed the scene in his head. The positioning, the recording angle, the rehearsed lines. Finally with someone strong. The threat, the flexing, the audience. It settled into place with quiet clarity. It was staged. It was filmed. It was bait. Chapter 2, The Slow Collapse of a Marriage. Before Murphy's Bar, before the recording, before the threat, there had been an airport. Calvin still remembered the smell of jet fuel and over-roasted coffee as he stepped through the sliding doors into the arrivals terminal. 14 years of coming home like that, duffel bag over one shoulder, eyes scanning automatically, body wired for threat even under fluorescent lights. Jessica used to run to him. The first few deployments, she would sprint the moment she saw him. Arms around his neck, laughing, crying, telling him he was home. The last time was different. She stood near baggage claim, scrolling through her phone. When she noticed him, she smiled, but she didn't move. He walked to her instead. Hey, she said, slipping her phone into her purse. He kissed her. She tasted like peppermint gum. You look tired, she added. Long flight. That's not what I meant. He didn't ask what she did mean. Civilian life was quieter than combat, but somehow heavier. Calvin took a position with a construction firm, operations management. It paid well. It was stable. It was safe. Safe. Jessica began using that word like an accusation. You're different, she said one night over dinner he'd cooked, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, the way she used to like it. Different how? Closed off. You don't talk. I'm talking now. That's not what I mean. He never quite knew what she meant. He tried. He truly did. He scheduled date nights. Took weekends off. Left his phone in another room. When she said he seemed distant, he listened more. When she said he seemed intense, he softened his tone. But something had shifted in her. She joined a new gym 6 months after his final return home. At first, it was healthy. Positive. I just want to feel strong, she'd said. You know? Like you. He'd smiled at that. Soon, the gym became her second home. Early mornings, late evenings, weekend conditioning sessions. She started following fitness influencers, posting motivational quotes about transformation and power. Her wardrobe changed gradually. More fitted, more revealing. "You've been gone most of our marriage," she said during one argument. "I had to build myself while you were saving the world." "I wasn't saving the world," he replied quietly. "I was doing my job. Well, I need something that's mine." He didn't fight that. He respected independence. But independence turned into distance. Missed dinners became routine. "I already ate at the gym," she'd say, tossing her keys on the counter. Or, "Protein shake. I'm cutting." They began sleeping at different times. Different rhythms. Different worlds. He would wake at 0500 out of habit. She would come to bed at midnight, smelling faintly of rubber mats and cologne that wasn't his. One night he asked gently, "Who's Brock?" She didn't flinch, and that told him more than if she had. "Trainer," she replied smoothly. "Why? You say his name in your sleep." She laughed. "That's ridiculous." He watched her for a long moment. "You're being paranoid," she added. "Just because you're used to looking for enemies doesn't mean there is one." That word again. Paranoid. He let it drop. The truth didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came in silence. Jessica had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. A message notification blinked in the corner of the screen while she showered. Calvin wasn't a man who invaded privacy lightly, but he was a man trained to notice patterns. The sender's name, Brock M. He didn't open it at first. He stared at it. Then he clicked. The thread was long. Not weeks. Months. Flirting that turned into intimacy. Inside jokes. Photos exchanged. Complaints about him. "He doesn't get me. He's so emotionally unavailable. You deserve someone who makes you feel alive. I feel strongest when I'm with you." Calvin's chest didn't explode. It compressed. He scrolled further. Plans. Hotel reservations. A night she claimed was a girls' fitness retreat. He closed the laptop carefully before she came downstairs. He didn't confront her immediately. He waited. That was his way. When he finally spoke, it was calm. "Are you sleeping with him?" Jessica froze mid-sip of water. "What? Brock?" Her face shifted through surprise, anger, then offense. "You went through my things? I asked you a question. You're unbelievable." Silence stretched. "Are you?" She slammed the glass down. "Maybe if you were actually present in this marriage, I wouldn't need someone who is." It wasn't denial. It was deflection. Over the next months, she rewrote history. "You've always been cold. You scare me sometimes. I feel like I live with a stranger." Gaslighting wasn't loud. It was erosion. She told friends he struggled to adjust, that he had issues, that she tried to support him. He never raised his voice, never broke anything, never threatened. He moved into the guest room quietly, filed for divorce quietly. When neighbors asked, he said, "It didn't work out." He gave her dignity she no longer gave him. The final betrayal wasn't the affair. It was the branding. A week before the meeting at Murphy's bar, a coworker approached him hesitantly. "Hey man, this you?" He turned the phone around. There was Brock, shirtless in a gym, sweat shining under fluorescent lights. Caption: "Ran off some special forces husband. Told him to walk before I put him in a coma. She's with a real man now." Thousands of likes. Laughing emojis. American flag emojis. Comments praising his dominance. Calvin watched the clip. It was from the parking lot outside Jessica's apartment complex weeks earlier. Brock stepping forward. Calvin stepping back, not retreating but disengaging. The video cut right before Brock had stumbled slightly on uneven pavement. Edited. Curated. Narrative built. Jessica stood in the background in the video, watching, not stopping it. He felt something then that wasn't heartbreak. It was calculation. This wasn't just infidelity. It was public positioning. Brock wasn't just sleeping with his wife. He was building a persona. And Calvin had been turned into a prop. A defeated veteran. A weak husband. A stepping stone. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was weaponized. Calvin closed the video. His reflection stared back at him in the dark phone screen. 14 years of service. Brothers buried. Scars earned. Reduced to a marketing tool for a cage fighter's ego. His jaw tightened slightly. This isn't just personal humiliation. It's reputation warfare. Chapter 3, the video goes live. It hit the internet at 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. Calvin knew the exact time because his phone vibrated 3 times in less than a minute while he was reviewing blueprints inside a half-finished office complex downtown. He ignored the first buzz. He always ignored the first buzz. The second came with a text preview from an old teammate. "You good?" The third was from his operations manager. "Hey man, might want to see this before someone else brings it up." Calvin set his pen down. The building around him hummed with the sounds of civilian normalcy. Nail guns popping, radios playing classic rock, forklifts beeping as they reversed. He stepped into a quieter hallway framed with exposed studs and pulled out his phone. There it was, Brock's page. A still-frame thumbnail of Murphy's Bar. Calvin standing near the booth, sleeves rolled, expression calm but unreadable. Jessica partially visible behind Brock's shoulder. Across the top, in bold white text, "Local MMA prospect scares off military tough guy." The play count was climbing in real time. 12,406 views. 12,438. 12,501. He tapped it. The clip had been edited carefully. It began with Brock cracking his knuckles in dramatic slow motion. The audio was sharpened, so the sound echoed louder than it had in reality. Then Brock's voice, clear and amplified. "Walk out now, or I'll put you in a coma." Cut. Camera angle shifted slightly, zoomed in on Calvin's face as he unbuttoned his sleeves. The background audio lowered, dramatic music layered faintly underneath. Calvin's words were trimmed. "You fight in a cage," cut. 14 years, cut. 53 ways. It made him sound like he was trying to intimidate. Then the final edit. Brock stepping forward. Calvin stepping back toward the door. Freeze frame. On-screen text. And just like that, he walked. The video ended with Brock laughing and flexing toward the camera. No context. No balance. No footage of Calvin adjusting the phone. No footage of Brock hesitating. Narrative complete. Calvin exhaled once through his nose. He didn't feel heat rising in his chest. He didn't feel the urge to respond. He scrolled down. The comments were already a battlefield. "Guess the military ain't what it used to be." Cage battlefield. Dude folded. Jess upgraded for sure. Keyboard warrior in real life. Mixed among them were a few voices attempting defense. "You don't know what that guy's done." Editing cuts a lot out. They were drowned out quickly. Brock replied selectively, fueling the fire. "Respect to vets, but don't talk tough if you can't back it up." "I don't bully, I just protect what's mine." Calvin locked the phone and slid it back into his pocket. "Everything all right?" his manager asked from behind him. "Yeah," Calvin replied evenly. "Just noise." But the noise followed him. At lunch, 2 younger subcontractors were watching the clip again near the scaffolding. "That's him," one whispered, not quietly enough. Calvin passed them without acknowledgement. On the drive home, sports radio cut to a local segment. And in lighter news, a regional MMA prospect went viral last night after confronting what he claims was a former Special Forces soldier. The clip's picking up serious traction. Calvin turned the volume down. At a red light, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He let go to voicemail. Another buzz. Text from Jessica. "You could have just ignored it. Now everyone thinks you're unstable." He stared at the message for a long second, then deleted it. By evening, the clip had crossed 50,000 views. Brock went live from his gym. Calvin watched that too. Not emotionally. Observationally. Brock stood shirtless in front of a heavy bag, sweat gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. "Look," Brock said to the camera, pacing. "I respect service. I do. But don't come at me acting like you're dangerous. There's levels to this. I train every day. I fight in front of crowds. That's real pressure." He shadowboxed for effect. Comments streamed upward in rapid fire. "Sign this man. Future champ." Vet got humble. Brock leaned close to the camera. "Anyone can talk about war stories. In my world, you either swing or you don't." He winked. Calvin paused the video. He replayed certain sections. Not the insults, the body language, the cadence, the timing of uploads, the way the caption framed the narrative before anyone else could. This wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic branding. Brock was leveraging controversy to build momentum, turning personal conflict into promotional currency. Calvin respected that. Not the ethics, the execution. He opened a notepad app, began typing, date posted, time posted, initial engagement rate, hashtags used, accounts boosting it. He checked Brock's follower count, up by 3,201 day. Sponsorship tags appeared in the comments, small supplement brands chiming in with fire emojis. The machine was working. Calvin leaned back in his chair at the kitchen table. The house felt larger now without Jessica's presence. Echoes where conversation used to live. He stood and walked to the hallway mirror. Studied himself. No visible rage. No trembling. Just clarity. He thought back to deployment briefings. When information hit fast and messy. When rumors spread through villages before facts could catch up. The worst thing a soldier could do in that environment was react emotionally. Emotion clouded pattern recognition. Pattern recognition won wars. He sat back down, opened his laptop, pulled up Brock's full profile, scrolled back months, years. He didn't comment, didn't message, didn't defend himself publicly. Silence was uncomfortable. Silence invited underestimation. Another notification popped up, a direct message request. He opened it. Hey man, don't know you personally. Just wanted to say, editing can lie. Keep your head up. Calvin read it once. Closed it. He wasn't interested in sympathy. He was interested in truth. The clip continued, climbing overnight. Local sports blogs embedded it. A small MMA podcast dissected it. One host laughed. You could see the vet's confidence drain. Confidence. Calvin replayed the moment in his mind, the exact second before he turned and walked. He hadn't walked away because he was intimidated. He'd walked because the fight wasn't worth having. Different calculation. Different battlefield. The internet didn't understand nuance. It understood spectacle. By midnight, the view count crossed 100,000. Brock posted again. A promotional flyer for an upcoming amateur bout. Across the top. Come see the man who sent a special forces guy running. Ticket link below. Calvin stared at the screen for a long time. Then something shifted inside him. Not anger. Not humiliation. A switch he hadn't flipped since leaving active duty. The part of him that assessed threat, influence, terrain. This wasn't about pride. It was about narrative control. Brock had drawn a line publicly. Had turned a private divorce into marketing collateral. Calvin closed the laptop gently. He stood, walked to the back porch. The night air was cool, still. He folded his arms and let the quiet settle around him. He'd been ambushed socially, underestimated physically, misrepresented strategically, all correctable variables. Inside, his phone buzzed again with another notification. He didn't check it. Instead, he let his breathing slow. When he finally went back inside, he moved with purpose. Laptop reopened. New document created. Header typed cleanly across the top. Subject. Brock, full background assessment. He paused only once. Then continued typing. He wasn't reacting. He was planning. The same way he had overseas. Calm. Methodical. Unseen. Target acquired. Chapter 4, Recon Mode. Calvin didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the video. Because of a shift. Once his mind locked onto a mission, rest became secondary to clarity. He had learned that years ago in places where hesitation cost lives. Information first. Action later. At 0500, he was already at the kitchen table. Coffee black. Laptop open. Notebook beside him. The header he'd typed the night before stared back at him. Subject. Brock. Full background assessment. He began with the obvious. Brock's public name. Brock Reynolds. A quick search pulled up highlight clips, local fight promotions, gym tags. The branding was consistent, aggressive, patriotic undertones, slogans about dominance and discipline. Calvin didn't care about the slogans. He wanted paperwork. He opened the State Athletic Commission website. Amateur fighters required licensing. Licensing required documentation. He searched. No, Brock Reynolds listed in the last 3 years. He leaned back slightly. Then he searched broader. Reynolds, B. Reynolds, Brock M. Nothing recent. Calvin tapped his pen once against the table. Aliases weren't uncommon in promotions. Sometimes fighters shortened names. Sometimes they used middle names. He returned to social media. Scrolled deeper. 3 years back, a tagged birthday post from someone named Marcus R. Caption: "Still can't believe you changed it to Brock. Face with tears of joy, Calvin's eyes sharpened." He clicked the tag. Profile private. But the comments weren't. Another friend had replied, "Marcus Brock Reynolds sounds better anyway." Marcus. He returned to the commission database. Marcus Reynolds. There it was. License expired 18 months ago. Amateur record listed. 5 wins, 4 losses. Calvin compared that to Brock's Instagram bio. Pro record. 9-1. Not amateur. Pro. He opened another tab and searched professional fight databases. No listing. He clicked through regional promotion sites. No professional bouts recorded. He cross-referenced event posters Brock had shared. 2 of them labeled clearly as amateur exhibitions. One event listed him as M. Reynolds. Calvin zoomed in on a grainy fight card photo. The result next to Marcus Reynolds' name read, "Loss, TKO round 2. That loss did not appear anywhere on Brock's social media. He wrote it down. 5-4 amateur record. Inflated to 9-1 pro. No professional licensure. He sipped his coffee. This wasn't uncommon either. Fighters exaggerated. Promoters embellished. But the numbers mattered. He dug further. He searched older event footage on obscure video platforms. Low-quality recordings uploaded by local gyms. In one clip, Marcus Reynolds stumbled backward after absorbing a clean right hook. Referee waved it off. Caption under the video: "Reynolds can't handle pressure." Calvin noted the date. That loss also didn't exist on Brock's curated highlight reel. Only knockouts he'd won. None he'd suffered. Selective memory. He moved to gym affiliations. Brock currently trained at Iron Forge MMA, a flashy facility with bright branding and influencer partnerships. But older posts showed him at 2 different gyms within the last 4 years. He messaged a former teammate who now worked private security for regional sports events. "Ever heard of Iron Forge banning a fighter?" Calvin typed. Response came 10 minutes later. "Yeah, couple guys." "What?" "Marcus Reynolds." Pause. Then, "Didn't he pop hot once?" Calvin's fingers stilled. Define hot. Rumor was failed test after amateur bout. Nothing public. Jim swept it quiet. He left before suspension paperwork finalized. Calvin stared at the message. Rumor wasn't fact. He needed confirmation. He searched public disciplinary actions. Nothing under Brock Reynolds. He searched under Marcus Reynolds. One entry appeared. Archive notice, partially redacted. License temporarily suspended pending review. No reason listed. He saved the PDF. He called the Athletic Commission office mid-morning. A woman answered. "State Athletics, how can I help you?" "I'm verifying licensing history for Marcus Reynolds," Calvin said evenly. "Competed amateur roughly 2 years ago." There was keyboard clicking. "License expired," she replied. "No active status." "Was there ever a failed drug screening attached?" Pause. "I can't discuss specifics over the phone." "I understand." He didn't push. Instead, he thanked her and hung up. Information denied still meant something. He turned back to social media inconsistencies. Brock had posted a photo 3 months ago claiming he'd headlined a regional event. Calvin found the event card online. Main event. 2 different fighters. Brock's name was third from the bottom. Another exaggeration. Small, but consistent. Pattern emerging. He opened a spreadsheet and began organizing columns. Public claim, verified fact, source. He filled it methodically. 9-1 pro record. No pro fights license, state database, headline event, preliminary bout, event archive, undefeated streak. 2 documented TKO losses, video archive, active license. Expired 18 months, commission record. Each entry tightened the picture. This wasn't incompetence. It was construction. A persona built carefully on a mission. Around noon, Calvin drove past Iron Forge MMA. He didn't go inside. He parked across the street and observed. Glass windows. Merchandise visible. Posters featuring Brock mid-strike with slogans like "Built Different." 2 teenagers entered, pointing at his image. Brand influence. Calvin watched Brock exit the building 20 minutes later, laughing loudly with 2 younger fighters. He slapped one on the back and flexed playfully for a passing car that honked in recognition. Performance didn't turn off outside the cage. Calvin took note of his vehicle. License plate. Minor detail. Back home. He reviewed everything again. He replayed Brock's viral video. The confidence. The narrative. The manufactured dominance. Then he watched the amateur fight where Marcus Reynolds had been knocked out. Different body language. Hesitation under pressure. Eyes darting before the final strike landed. Calvin paused the frame. Zoomed in. The myth cracked in stillness. He leaned back. This isn't about fighting, he murmured to himself. He opened Brock's earliest public posts. Before the muscles filled out fully. Before the slogans. There were selfies about reinventing himself. Quotes about never letting people see you weak again. Calvin recognized that tone. Overcompensation. He flipped to financial filings next, public civil records. 2 small claims cases filed against Marcus Reynolds within the last 3 years. Unpaid training fees. 1 dismissed after settlement. He added it to the spreadsheet. Then he noticed something subtle. In multiple older posts, Brock tagged a supplement company claiming sponsorship. Calvin searched the company's athlete roster. No Brock. He emailed them under a neutral account. Can you confirm athlete partnership with Brock Reynolds? Automated reply. Within hours, a representative responded. Thank you for reaching out. Brock Reynolds is not currently, nor has he ever been a contracted athlete with our brand. Calvin saved that email too, layer by layer. He wasn't looking for a knockout punch. He was mapping structural weakness. By evening, the spreadsheet spanned multiple tabs. Identity discrepancies, record inflation, licensing gaps, suspension notice, false sponsorship implication. He closed his laptop briefly and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a hardened professional athlete climbing legitimate ranks. This was curation, selective truth presented as dominance. Brock wasn't building a fight career. He was building optics. Calvin reopened the laptop and typed one final note at the bottom of the document. Conclusion. Image exceeds verified substance. He read it once, then added another line beneath it. This isn't a fighter. It's branding. Calvin kept digging. Chapter 5, Stolen Valor. The turning point didn't arrive loudly. It appeared in a comment. Calvin was seated at his kitchen table again, late evening light fading through the blinds, when a new clip surfaced on Brock's page. Another gym video. Another performance. This time Brock was mid-interview, sweat still rolling down his temples after sparring. A local podcast host held a microphone near his face. People are saying you've got that warrior mentality, the host said. Where does that come from? Brock grinned, breathing heavy but theatrical. Discipline, he replied. Before fighting, I served. Military life builds killers. MMA just refined it. Calvin's fingers froze on the trackpad. The host leaned in. You were in? Yeah, Brock said casually. Did my time. Learned what real pressure is. Cage is easy compared to overseas. The clip cut there. Dramatic music layered in. Caption below. From battlefield to cage. Fire emojis. Flag emojis. Salutes in the comments. Calvin didn't blink. He replayed the line. Before fighting, I served. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even emphasized. It was smooth, integrated into the narrative. He scrolled the comments. Respect for your service, bro. Vet and fighter? Beast. Thank you for protecting this country. Brock replied with a modest shrug emoji. He didn't correct them. He didn't clarify. He let it breathe. Calvin closed the laptop slowly. The room felt smaller. He had tolerated exaggeration. Record padding. Manufactured dominance. That was ego. This was something else. He stood and walked to the hallway closet where an old olive green duffel bag rested on the top shelf. He hadn't opened it in months. He pulled it down carefully and unzipped it. Inside were folded uniforms, neatly preserved. A shadow box containing medals. A patch from his unit, edges worn from real field use. He ran his fingers along the fabric. There were names attached to that cloth. Men who didn't come home. Men whose families still visited headstones. His jaw tightened slightly. He zipped the bag shut and returned to the kitchen. Laptop reopened. New tab. He began with public records, veteran databases, service verification tools available to organizations for credential checks. Search. Brock Reynolds. Nothing. Search. Marcus Reynolds. Nothing. He leaned back. Maybe different branch. Different spelling. He messaged someone he hadn't spoken to in over a year. Ethan Cole, Personnel Records Office, Rhett. Calvin typed. Need a quiet confirmation. Marcus Brock Reynolds. Claimed prior service. Any record? 3 dots appeared within minutes. Ethan responded. Full name and DOB. Calvin typed what he'd gathered from licensing documents. A longer pause this time. He imagined Ethan sitting in some quiet home office, glasses low on his nose, accessing databases he once navigated daily. 10 minutes passed. Then the message arrived. 0 record in DoD personnel system under that name or variations. No enlistment. No discharge. Nothing. Calvin read it twice. Check National Guard or Reserves, he replied. Already did. Silence settled heavily. Calvin's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could he have used an alias? Ethan's response came firm. You can't serve anonymously. Not in this country. Calvin exhaled slowly. He returned to Brock's social media page. Scrolled further back. There, 6 months earlier, a photo. Brock standing in what appeared to be camouflage fatigues, sleeves rolled, boots laced. An American flag behind him. Caption. Some battles never leave you. Grateful for the lessons. Comments flooded with gratitude. Calvin clicked the image. Zoomed in. The uniform was wrong. The patch placement slightly off. Boot laces tied improperly for regulation. Small details civilians wouldn't notice. But he did. He saved the image. Then he searched the image through reverse lookup. Within seconds, results populated. The base photo, identical flag backdrop, belonged to a stock photography site. Calvin's eyes hardened. He opened another image Brock had posted, this one cropped tightly around his torso in uniform, face partially shadowed. Calvin adjusted brightness and contrast. The name tape above the chest pocket looked blurred. He zoomed further. The font didn't match standard issue. He sat back. This wasn't misremembered service. It wasn't vague storytelling. It was fabrication. He called Ethan. The older man answered on the 3rd ring. You don't usually call unless it matters, Ethan said. It matters, Calvin replied. You sure about the name? Positive. No service record. If he's claiming, it's false. Calvin hesitated. There's no dishonorable discharge, either. Ethan scoffed lightly. Can't be dishonorably discharged if you never enlisted. A rumor had circulated in older gym threads Calvin had skimmed earlier, something about he got kicked out of the military. That rumor, too, was fiction. There had never been service. There had never been discharge. Just story. You thinking of doing something? Ethan asked quietly. I'm thinking, Calvin replied. Careful, Ethan said. Stolen valor cases can get messy. But if he's profiting off it, that's different. Calvin thanked him and ended the call. He remained seated, staring at the wall. 14 years. Birthdays missed. Holidays spent overseas. Friends buried with folded flags presented to grieving mothers. And this man, this performer, was wearing it like a costume. He reopened Brock's latest interview clip. Watched his expression as he said, Before fighting, I served. There was no hesitation, no flicker of guilt, just smooth branding. Calvin opened a fresh document. Title, Military Claim Verification. Brock Reynolds. He inserted screenshots of the posts. Embedded Ethan's written confirmation. Noted the absence of service records across all branches. Added analysis of the uniform discrepancies. Then he wrote a single line beneath the evidence. No verified military service. He leaned back in his chair, hands resting on the keyboard. This had started as humiliation. Then it became exposure. Now it was something else entirely. Principle. He thought of the men he'd served with, of the quiet pride they carried, of the way they never once bragged about it for attention. He imagined Brock accepting salutes in comment sections from strangers who believed the story. Calvin's voice, low and steady, filled the empty kitchen. You don't get to wear that. The house remained silent. But inside him, the mission clarified. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about Jessica. It wasn't about the viral video. It was about truth. About earned sacrifice. About lines you don't cross. Calvin closed the laptop gently. Now it's not revenge. It's principle. Calvin takes this personally. Chapter 6, Financial and Personal Exploitation. The deeper Calvin dug, the less impressive Brock became, and the more predictable. It started with a phone call he almost didn't make. Calvin sat in his truck across from Iron Forge MMA again, engine off, notebook resting on the passenger seat. Afternoon sunlight reflected sharply against the gym's glass facade. Inside, silhouettes moved in rhythmic bursts, bodies striking bags, trainers shouting corrections. Branding looked strong from the outside. He dialed the number listed publicly for the gym. A young woman answered. Iron Forge, this is Melissa. Hi, Calvin said evenly. I'm looking to verify something for a sponsorship inquiry. Does Marcus Reynolds train there? A pause. We have a Brock Reynolds. Full legal name Marcus Brock Reynolds? Longer pause this time. Yes. He trains here. Is he in good standing with the gym? Silence. Keyboard clicks. He's currently not on our active billing roster. Calvin kept his tone neutral, meaning he's not on a paid monthly plan at the moment. Outstanding balance. Another pause. A shift in her voice, cautious now. Sir, I can't discuss account specifics. That's fine. Thank you. He ended the call and wrote a single line in his notebook. Iron Forge, not active billing. He watched the gym doors as Brock exited 30 minutes later, laughing loudly with two younger fighters. Slapped one on the shoulder. Checked his reflection in the window before walking to his truck. No sign of financial strain and posture. Performance didn't show debt. That evening, Calvin reviewed public court records again, this time filtering by civil claims. 2 minor filings appeared under Marcus Reynolds in the past 3 years. One from a training facility for unpaid membership dues. Another from a small event promoter for breach of appearance agreement. He clicked the scan documents. The first was straightforward, 6 months, unpaid, case dismissed after partial settlement. The second included a complaint line that made Calvin pause. Fighter failed to appear for scheduled bout after promotional materials distributed. Brock had promoted that event heavily online. Calvin remembered seeing the poster, bold font, Brock's face central, dates circled in red. He searched the event results. The card showed a last-minute replacement fighter, under Marcus Reynolds' name. No show. He picked up his phone and called the promoter listed on the filing. A gravelly voice answered. Yeah. Is this Dan from South River Promotions? Who's asking? Name's Calvin. I'm doing background vetting for a potential sponsor. Want a clarification on Marcus Reynolds. A long exhale on the other end. That guy. I take it there were issues. You could say that. Promoted him as co-main event. Sold tickets on his name. Week of the fight, he stops answering calls. Reason given. Later claimed injury. No medical paperwork. We had to scramble to fill the slot. Was he compensated? He'd already taken an advance. Calvin let that settle. Would you book him again? Dan snorted. Not a chance. Calvin thanked him and ended the call. He added another column to his spreadsheet. Promoter relations, negative. Next, he searched further into the flag suspension notice he'd saved earlier. The wording had been vague. He reached out again to Ethan, who forwarded him a contact in regulatory compliance, someone who understood the quiet language of disciplinary notes. The contact called back within an hour. You're asking about a temporary suspension 2 years ago, the man asked. Yes. It was flagged internally, not fully executed. For what reason? A pause. Inconsistent screening results. Calvin's tone didn't change, meaning possible banned substance indicator. Not enough for full sanction at the time. Fighter withdrew before review completed. Was it cleared? No formal clearance on record. Calvin closed his eyes briefly. Rumor confirmed. Quietly. He thanked the man and ended the call. Failed drug test flagged quietly. Another line added to the growing pattern. Performance enhanced. Record inflated. Obligations unmet. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the spreadsheet that now spanned multiple tabs. Then he remembered something Jessica had said months earlier. He's building something real, she had insisted during one argument. He just needs support. Support. Calvin opened the shared financial records he still had access to, accounts not yet separated legally. Jessica had removed most of her activity from their joint credit card, but not all of it. He filtered transactions by merchant. Iron Forge MMA, multiple payments over 6 months. Amounts varied, higher than standard membership fees. He searched the gym's posted pricing. The numbers didn't match. He zoomed into specific transactions. Personal training, BR. Supplement package, Elite. Equipment purchase. All charged to Jessica's card. He scrolled further. Hotel charges on weekends. He remembered her claiming team travel. Restaurant tabs, near fight venues. Gas station purchases in cities where Brock had competed. He did the math quickly. Thousands of dollars. His jaw tightened slightly. He opened one more statement from 2 months ago. Charge description. Event advance, SRP. South River Promotions. The same promoter who said Brock had taken an advance and failed to appear. Jessica's card had covered it. Calvin sat back slowly. He replayed conversations in his head. He's investing in his career. You don't understand what fighters sacrifice. He'll pay it back once he makes it. He thought of the way Brock had flexed in Murphy's bar, the way Jessica had looked at him, convinced she'd chosen strength. Calvin picked up his phone and dialed Jessica. She answered after 3 rings. What do you want? I'm reviewing joint accounts, he said calmly. You're covering his expenses. Silence. That's none of your business. It still is until the divorce finalizes. He's paying me back. With what? Her voice sharpened. You're jealous. No, Calvin replied evenly. I'm observant. You don't know him. I know numbers. She hung up. Calvin lowered the phone slowly. He looked back at the spreadsheet. Unpaid gym dues. Blacklisted promoter. Quiet drug flag. Inflated record. And Jessica, financing the illusion. He stood and walked to the window, watching the evening settle over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on one by one. He thought about the word strong. Jessica had used it like a shield, but strength didn't require hidden subsidies. It didn't require manufactured credentials. It didn't require others to carry its weight. He returned to the table and typed one final note at the bottom of the document. Financial dependency concealed beneath performance narrative. He read it once, then closed the laptop. Jessica didn't leave him for strength. She left for performance. And performance always cracks. Chapter 7. The calm before the setup. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning. Certified mail. Calvin signed for them at the door without expression, thanked the courier, and closed it gently. The envelope was thick, but not heavy. Paper rarely weighed much. Decisions did. He placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Jessica had checked nearly every box. Irreconcilable differences. No contest. Division of assets outlined cleanly. She wanted a condo downtown. She waived claim to the house. No alimony requested. Quick, efficient, detached. Calvin read every page carefully. Not because he planned to fight it, but because that's what he did. He examined terrain before stepping on it. His phone buzzed. Jessica. He let it ring once before answering. Did you get them? She asked. Yes. Good. I don't want this dragged out. It won't be. A pause. She sounded almost disappointed. You're not going to argue? She pressed. No, another pause. I expected something, she admitted. You've had something, Calvin replied evenly. For months. Silence. Well, she said finally, regaining edge, I'm glad you're being mature about it. He almost smiled at the phrasing. I'll sign, he said, but I want one final in-person meeting. For what? To close it properly. She hesitated. Why? Because we were married 8 years. The line stayed quiet for several seconds. Fine, she said at last. Public place. Murphy's bar, he replied. A beat. That's dramatic. It's neutral. Another pause. Brock will be there, she said, testing him. That's fine. You're not going to cause a scene? No, she exhaled softly. Tomorrow. 7. 7, he confirmed. The call ended. Calvin looked at the papers again. Then he signed them. No hesitation. No flourish. Just ink. He slid them into a folder. Then he stood and walked down the hallway to his home office. The door closed quietly behind him. On the desk sat a neatly stacked binder. Tabs labeled, documents printed, screenshots highlighted. Weeks of methodical collection. Evidence arranged not emotionally, but structurally. He opened it. Page 1. Identity discrepancies. Page 2. Fight record inflation. Page 3. Suspension notice. Page 4. Promoter complaint. Page 5. Sponsorship denial email. Page 6. Military claim verification. He flipped through slowly. Everything had been cross-checked twice. Nothing dramatic. Nothing fabricated. Just truth. He added one final item. Copies of Jessica's credit card statements. Specific charges highlighted cleanly. He placed the signed divorce papers on top of the stack. Closed the binder. The next evening, Calvin dressed simply. Dark jeans. Clean boots. Gray button-down shirt. Sleeves buttoned this time. No visible scars. No rolled cuffs. He checked his watch. 6:35 p.m. He left the house with the binder under his arm and drove toward Murphy's bar. The same neon signs flickered in the windows as before. The same low hum of conversation drifted out when he opened the door. He scanned the room once. Same table in the back corner. Jessica sat facing the entrance. She looked confident. Not smug this time, confident. Brock sat beside her again, leaning back with one arm stretched across the booth, occupying space as if claiming it. His posture screamed ownership. Jessica noticed Calvin first. Her lips curved slightly. He approached without hurry. Brock's eyes tracked him like before, measuring, dismissing. "Look who showed," Brock said, grinning. Calvin slid into the booth opposite them. He placed the binder beside him on the seat. No one commented on it. Jessica crossed her legs neatly. "You sign." He removed the divorce papers and placed them on the table. "Signed." She glanced at them quickly, scanning his signature. "That was easier than I thought," she said lightly. "I told you it would be." Brock chuckled. Guess he finally realized when he's outmatched. Jessica gave him a faint smile, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Calvin, searching for reaction. He gave none. The waitress approached. "Same as last time?" she asked cautiously. "Water," Calvin replied. "Beer," Brock said loudly. Jessica nodded for wine. As the waitress walked away, Brock leaned forward slightly. "So what's this proper closing you wanted?" he asked. "You gonna give a speech?" Calvin folded his hands calmly on the table. "No speech." Jessica tilted her head. "Then what?" He looked at her evenly. "You deserve clarity." Brock laughed. "Clarity?" "Man," she chose. "Yes," Calvin said. She did. The drinks arrived. Brock took a long sip of beer, never breaking eye contact. "You know," Brock said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, "most guys would have swung by now." "Most guys," Calvin replied, "don't think long-term." Jessica shifted slightly in her seat. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means this isn't emotional." Brock leaned back again, spreading his arms. "It sure looks emotional." Calvin reached down calmly and lifted the binder onto the table. The sound of it landing was soft but solid. Jessica's eyes dropped to it instinctively. "What's that?" she asked. "Closure," Calvin replied. Brock smirked. "Homework, in a way." Jessica looked annoyed. "If this is about the past, it's about the present," Calvin interrupted gently. She went quiet. Brock leaned forward again, forearms on the table, trying to dominate the space. "You still think you're in control," he said. Calvin met his gaze without blinking. "I never said I wasn't." A flicker of irritation crossed Brock's face. Jessica looked between them, uncertainty creeping in for the first time. "You said you weren't going to cause a scene," she said carefully. "I'm not," Calvin replied. His voice remained level. "Even." He opened the binder slowly. Jessica's confidence faltered just slightly. Brock's jaw tightened. Calvin wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't reactive. He was prepared. Not emotionally. Strategically. Chapter 8. The Exposure. The binder rested between them like a quiet weapon. Calvin didn't rush. He opened it slowly, deliberately, as if he were beginning a business presentation instead of dismantling a man. Jessica shifted in her seat. The earlier confidence she wore like perfume had thinned. Brock leaned back with a smirk that felt slightly forced now, his fingers drumming against the table. "You really brought paperwork to a divorce meeting?" Brock scoffed. Calvin ignored him. He slid the first sheet from the binder and placed it neatly in front of Jessica. "I'll keep this simple," he said. Jessica glanced down. Her brows pulled together. Across the top of the page, Department of Defense records request. No service found. What is this? She asked, though her voice had already tightened. Calvin's tone stayed calm. You told her you served. Brock snorted. I said I train with guys who served. Big difference. Jessica looked at him sharply. You told me you did 2 tours. Brock's jaw flexed. I said I was overseas fighting. That doesn't always mean military. Calvin slid a second page forward, a highlighted transcript of an interview Brock had given to a local podcast. I fought for my country before I fought in cages. Jessica's face drained a shade lighter. You said that, she whispered. Brock's smirk faltered. It's branding. Branding, Calvin repeated quietly. Interesting word. The air at the table thickened. Calvin didn't raise his voice, didn't accuse. He simply turned a page. The next document slid across the wood. An email header from a regional MMA promoter. Subject: Do not book, policy violation. Jessica leaned closer, reading the lines. Failure to disclose suspension status. Concerns about conduct. Recommend other organizations proceed cautiously. Her lips parted slightly. What is this? Brock shifted in his seat. It's politics. Promoters blacklist guys all the time. Calvin turned another page. A scan lab report. Bold lettering near the bottom. Adverse analytical finding. Substance. Bold in 1 metabolite. Jessica looked up slowly. What does that mean? Brock's voice sharpened. It means nothing. Half the roster's on something. They just test selectively. Calvin tapped the highlighted section calmly. It means he failed a steroid test. Silence. The noise of the bar carried on around them. Laughter from another table, clinking glasses, music humming low, but their booth felt sealed off from it. Jessica stared at Brock. You told me the suspension was paperwork. It was, he snapped. Technical. Calvin didn't react to the tension building. He slid the next sheet forward. A printed statement of financial delinquencies. Unpaid gym dues. Equipment financing past due. Credit card minimums missed. Jessica's eyes moved quickly now. I've been covering some of that, she said slowly, almost to herself. Yes, Calvin replied. Brock's head snapped toward him. Stay out of our finances. Our? Calvin asked mildly. Jessica looked at the dates, the balances, the transfers from her account. Her breathing changed, subtle, shallow. You said sponsors were late paying, she said. They are, Brock insisted. Calvin turned one more page. A sponsorship rejection email. Unable to proceed due to compliance concerns, pending regulatory review. Jessica blinked. Regulatory review? She repeated. Brock's composure was thinning fast now. You digging through my life like a stalker? I requested public records, Calvin said evenly. Everything here is verifiable. He reached into the binder again. The next document wasn't text-heavy. It was a still frame from the confrontation video, the one that had circulated after the first incident at Murphy's. Brock standing, Calvin seated. Caption online. Former soldier intimidated by pro fighter. Calvin slid a second still beside it. Timestamp overlay visible. Uncut version. Brock stepping into Calvin's space first. Jessica's eyes darted between the two images. What is this? She asked. Proof the video was edited, Calvin replied. Brock's hand slammed lightly against the table. It was clipped for social media. That's normal. Normal, Calvin echoed. Jessica stared at the difference between perception and sequence, between narrative and fact. She looked at Brock, really looked at him, as if seeing angles she'd missed before. Her voice dropped. Did you edit it? Brock hesitated a fraction too long. That's marketing, he muttered. Calvin closed the binder halfway. But he wasn't finished. One more thing, he said calmly. He placed a final sheet down. An email confirmation. Subject. Received. Investigative submission. Jessica read the sender's name. A journalist from a respected sports outlet. Her eyes lifted slowly. What is that? She asked. Confirmation a journalist has received everything, Calvin replied. The words didn't carry threat. They carried inevitability. Brock's face shifted fully now. Not confidence. Not swagger. Something raw. You sent this out? He demanded. I submitted documentation, Calvin corrected. You're trying to ruin me. Calvin's gaze remained steady. Truth doesn't ruin people. Lies do. Jessica looked between them again, but the balance had changed. She wasn't aligned beside Brock now. She was separate, her expression fractured, confusion bleeding into disbelief. "You said you were building toward a title shot," she said quietly. "I am," Brock snapped. "With a blacklist?" She shot back. "They can't blacklist talent." Calvin leaned back slightly. "They can," he said. Brock's breathing had grown heavier. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" he growled. "No," Calvin replied. "It makes me finished." Jessica's fingers trembled slightly against her wine glass. "You knew all this?" she asked Calvin. "For weeks. And you waited?" "Yes." "Why?" Calvin held her gaze. "Because exposure is most effective when the subject believes they're untouchable." Brock stood abruptly. The booth jolted. Several nearby patrons glanced over. "You smug," Brock began, stepping around the table. Jessica reached instinctively toward him. "Brock," but he was already moving. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Calvin didn't stand, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. Brock's face was no longer composed for cameras or crowds. It was stripped of polish, anger raw and uncontrolled. "You don't get to sit there and dissect my life," he barked. Calvin looked up at him evenly. "I just did." Jessica stood now, too, panic threading into her tone. "Stop it." "This isn't." Brock's fist clenched. His shoulders squared. He lunged. Chapter 9, the 1-second lesson. The moment Brock lunged, everything slowed for Calvin. Muscle memory took over. Not thought, not hesitation, just calculation. Brock's fist came in a tight arc, aiming for Calvin's jaw, a reckless swing loaded with rage and overconfidence. The entire bar seemed to blur around the two of them, glasses clinking in the background, Jessica's startled gasp, murmurs from nearby tables. Calvin shifted his weight subtly. A step to the side, just enough to redirect the momentum. Brock's fist sailed past empty air. "You!" Brock snarled, turning mid-swing, fury in his eyes. Calvin's hand met Brock's shoulder at the precise angle to exploit natural leverage. A slight press, carefully applied to a cluster of nerves at the junction of the collarbone and neck. Brock froze mid-motion, muscles locking like a machine jammed. His own weight began to betray him. He staggered forward, not from pain alone, but from absolute control. "Calvin." Jessica's voice broke through, quiet, almost pleading. "Stop." Calvin didn't raise his voice, didn't lunge, didn't show anger. Every breath measured, every movement minimal. His hands moved only to guide Brock down, maintaining absolute control without leaving a mark. Brock's eyes widened. Confusion first, then alarm. He tried to push back, to throw a strike, but every attempt was neutralized before it could generate force. His limbs felt foreign, uncooperative. Panic flickered behind his aggression. A nearby patron knocked over a chair in surprise. Calvin ignored the noise. He guided Brock to the floor, gently but firmly, until the man was seated on the bar floor, arms hanging limply at his sides. Jessica had risen fully, pressed against the table, witnessing the scene. Her eyes darted from Calvin to Brock and back again. How did you?" Calvin's voice remained calm, even. "Training is about precision, not spectacle." He stepped back slowly, keeping hands visible, posture relaxed. No theatrics, no display of power, just efficiency. Brock attempted to rise, but a subtle nerve lock at the shoulder kept him anchored. He flinched with every movement. His bravado evaporated, replaced by fear. The bar was silent now. Even the jukebox seemed muted. Patrons exchanged glances, whispering to each other. Some took out phones, but no one stepped forward. "You could have killed him," Jessica whispered, voice trembling. Calvin shook his head minutely. "I could have. I didn't. That's the difference." Brock's chest heaved. Sweat poured down his forehead, but it wasn't exertion. It was the shock of realizing raw muscle and aggression couldn't overcome controlled technique and years of trained discipline. You can't," Brock gasped. Words failed him. Calvin knelt just long enough to release the nerve pressure. Brock slumped slightly, exhausted, barely able to control his limbs. "Learn the lesson," Calvin said quietly, almost to himself. "Strength without control is nothing." Jessica exhaled sharply, relief flooding her features. Thank you. Thank you for stopping it. Calvin gave her a brief nod. I didn't start it. He stood, collected the binder from the table, and walked toward the exit. His movements were calm, measured, deliberate, each step a demonstration of quiet authority. Patrons whispered, some stared in awe, others in fear. Brock remained on the floor, stunned, realizing that every performance he had displayed before, the knuckle-cracking, the flexing, the loud threats, were empty gestures against someone who didn't need to perform to dominate. He could feel the weight of the room on him. For the first time, all his posturing meant nothing. Jessica moved to the doorway, hesitating. Where are you going? Nowhere, Calvin said simply. Just leaving. He passed the bar, unhurried, unflinching. No one attempted to stop him. No one needed to. The sirens had not arrived yet, and Calvin didn't wait. Police would respond to a fight call eventually, but he had already achieved the purpose. The lesson had been delivered, and it didn't require violence beyond what was necessary. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around him. He paused briefly, inhaling, feeling the calm that follows decisive action. No adrenaline rush, no lingering anger. Just the quiet satisfaction of precision, of principle upheld, of chaos controlled. He walked to his car, unlocked it, and slid in. No one followed. No one dared. The street was dimly lit, empty enough for him to leave unnoticed. He didn't check his phone. He didn't replay the scene in his head. There was nothing to replay. The lesson was complete. Calvin started the engine. Headlights cut through the darkness as he drove home. Every street he turned down was deliberate, controlled. Every motion mirrored the calm that had carried him through deployments, through personal betrayal, through months of silent preparation. When he arrived home, he parked quietly in the garage. The hum of the engine faded. He didn't check the news yet, didn't scroll social media. The battlefield of perception could wait. Inside, he placed the binder on the kitchen table. Coffee was still warm from earlier, untouched. He poured a glass of water, then sat in silence for a long moment, letting the night settle around him. He reflected briefly on the difference between Brock and himself. Brock had relied on muscle, on spectacle, on threats. Calvin had relied on discipline, strategy, and restraint. The contrast had been laid bare in a single second. By dawn, Calvin was awake again, coffee in hand, reviewing the latest online coverage. The bar incident had been captured, of course. Someone had filmed the commotion, but the narrative couldn't frame him poorly. The truth of controlled action outweighed performative aggression. And then it happened. The confirmation that his preparation had reached beyond the barroom. The Charlotte Observer published the story. Headline, bold across the digital front page. Local MMA prospect accused of stolen valor and fight record fabrication. Chapter 10, Aftermath and Rebirth. The next morning, Calvin woke to silence. No sirens, no ringing phone, just the faint hum of the air conditioner and the sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor. He poured a cup of coffee and opened his laptop, not out of habit, but to observe the world he had set into motion. The headlines hit immediately. MMA fighter exposed for stolen valor and fight record fabrication. Promoters and gyms distance from Brock Reynolds after scandal, social media reacts. Fans turn against viral fighter, Calvin read quietly. His jaw relaxed as the consequences unfolded exactly as he had anticipated. Within hours, sponsors began retracting contracts. Nutrition and supplement companies released statements distancing themselves from Brock Reynolds. His Instagram posts, once flooded with adoration, were now flooded with criticism and disbelief. He scrolled through forums. Comments ranged from incredulity to mockery. I can't believe he faked military service. All that flexing for nothing. He's a scammer, pure and simple. Even smaller gyms refused to allow him training privileges. Iron Forge barred him permanently. Regional promoters emailed publicly that he was no longer welcome at events. Any fighter who tried to associate with him risked losing credibility. It was a clean unraveling. Every lie he had built his image on collapsed like dominoes. Calvin closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the quiet sink in. He wasn't smug. He didn't gloat. He just observed. the same way he had observed Brock's weaknesses for weeks. Meanwhile, Jessica called. Her voice was thin, nervous, stripped of the prior arrogance she had carried. "Calvin, I saw everything," she began. "You've seen enough," he replied evenly, placing his coffee cup back on the counter. He drained my accounts. The credit card. My savings. Everything I trusted him with. Calvin listened quietly. He had already anticipated this. Financial exploitation was always part of Brock's performance. It had been a calculation on Calvin's part to document it carefully. "I'm signing the divorce, fully," she said, voice breaking. I made a mistake." Calvin didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. He let the words settle in, their weight final. "Good," he said softly. "Then we can both move on." They hung up, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a quiet exhalation of tension released. Over the following weeks, the world reacted predictably. Brock attempted to relocate to a different state, hoping to escape the public scrutiny. He tried new alias. Even there, his history preceded him. Local gyms refused membership, promoters wouldn't return calls, and online research quickly revealed the same revelations he hoped would stay buried. Calvin, meanwhile, reclaimed normalcy in his own life. He kept the house. The space that had once been a battleground of betrayal now felt like a sanctuary. He walked through each room slowly, noting small things, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, the faint smell of coffee, the soft creak of the stairs. It was ordinary life, and ordinary life had become extraordinary simply because it was free of manipulation and pretense. He returned to work at his construction firm. The company had offered him a partnership, recognizing not just his technical skill, but his leadership and integrity. Projects flourished under his guidance. He managed teams efficiently, delegating with precision, always observing, always calculating, traits honed overseas and refined during personal trials. Evenings became calm. He ate dinner quietly, often alone, sometimes joined by a few trusted friends. Sleep returned in deep, unbroken stretches. No nightmares. No lingering anger. Just rest. He noticed subtle changes in himself. His posture, once rigid from years of tension, relaxed. His hands, once always ready to defend or act, lay peacefully on the table. His mind, once spinning with betrayal, now found clarity in small, deliberate decisions. Jessica occasionally reached out, not with recrimination, but with practical matters, final paperwork, account closures, neutral communication about shared items. Calvin responded politely, efficiently. No emotional entanglement. He spent quiet nights reflecting, recalling the confrontations, the months of research, the painstaking verification of lies. He remembered each calculated action, each moment he exercised restraint. It wasn't about revenge. It hadn't been about spectacle. It had been about principle, about reclaiming truth from the distortion Brock had built. And it had worked. Weeks later, as Calvin walked through the neighborhood on a cool evening, he noticed children playing, neighbors chatting. The world had continued without him needing to act, yet he had quietly ensured justice. He paused, watching the sun dip behind distant trees. The air smelled of fall, crisp, clean, unpretentious. He inhaled slowly, savoring the simplicity of the moment. Strength, he realized, had little to do with loud gestures, bulging muscles, or intimidation. Those were illusions, performances designed to manipulate perception. True strength was restraint, patience, strategy, knowing when to act and when to wait, knowing when to strike and when to simply observe, and above all, knowing that one could never have needed to throw a punch at all to win. Calvin smiled slightly to himself, the kind of smile that comes from unshakable peace. His past, with all its betrayals and challenges, had forged a clarity that no viral video, no false narrative could shake. He walked the rest of the street slowly, deliberately, feeling the rhythm of life around him. The chaos had passed. The threats had been neutralized. The lies had crumbled, and he had reclaimed himself. The night air was quiet, but within him there was a steady pulse, calm, unwavering, resolute. Calvin had survived more than he ever anticipated. He had faced deception, betrayal, public humiliation, and performative violence. And he had done so without compromising his principles. The house, the firm, the quiet evenings, the sleep, all were markers of reclamation. Proof that one could rise above chaos and emerge intact, whole, and in control. True strength wasn't in dominating others. It wasn't in flexing for attention. It wasn't in shouting or striking. It was in holding still when everyone else expected motion, in listening when everyone else shouted, in knowing exactly how much pressure to apply and exactly when to release it. Calvin's eyes drifted to the night sky visible through the window. Stars twinkled faintly in the distance, indifferent to human struggle,